Market crashes. Astrologically, what do these all have in common? In this video, I am looking at the planetary transits and signatures of market crashes to see if there is a common influence during these times, during these periods. And this came about due to April 2nd's market crash occurring during a Saturn-Uranus sextile. I had previously forecasted that this would be a very positive time for the market, crypto market specifically, and it was not. So I decided to take a deeper look as to why this would have occurred, and I found a lot of interesting things occurring during market crashes, and it led me down a further and further rabbit hole of looking into this topic. So I'm just sharing the information that I have gathered and observed. So I took a look at 14 market crashes: 1857, 73, 1893, 1896, 1907, 1929, 1937, 1973, 87, 2000, 2008, 2015, 2020, and 2025. I took all the information that I found and I broke it down into charts and graphs because there's a lot of charts that I went through, and I will leave the link to the information. So if you'd like to take a look at it, you can. So maybe you can find more information that I possibly might have missed. Looking over this information, I was trying to find some common occurrences within all the charts. At first, I thought it was going to be many squares to Uranus and Saturn, between Uranus and Saturn. So I also looked at the north nodes to see if they were in maybe the same signs as different crashes, and I found that information to not be true. There was about an even distribution within the signs that the north node was in. It was in Cancer, Aquarius 2 times, Leo 2 times, Pisces twice, Taurus twice, Aries twice. 1 time it was in Capricorn, Sagittarius, and in Libra. So looking at this did not provide me any real information. What I could draw from this was that the most amount of times the north node was in fire signs when crashes did occur. Now, I took the degrees that the north node was at the time of crashes, and I did find that the degrees that they were at and the degrees that a planet is at represents a zodiac sign. So from this, I did find that many times the north node was at a degree that represented a water sign. So fire and water was pretty predominant within the charts. So then I took the planets and the transits that were occurring to see if there was a common denominator within all of this. Pluto was present in all of the crashes except for 2008. Neptune was involved in every single one of the crashes, and the north node was also involved. Pluto is dark blue, Neptune is yellow, north node is this light blue. Mars was also involved in all of these crashes as well. Lilith, I was pretty surprised, was also involved in every single one of the crashes. I did not expect that. Saturn was involved in some of them, not all of them. Jupiter was involved less than Saturn was. Chiron was involved, and Uranus was involved the least amount of times in all of these crashes. The transits that were occurring at the time of these crashes wasn't all oppositions and squares or conjunctions to challenging planets. That actually surprised me the most. So I broke it down even further to see the dominant types of transits, whether it's a square, opposition, conjunction, trine, sextile. And I also included parallel and contraparallel. I did not break that down further, which I should have, because that would also be a further indicator, but this is how I did the charts. So there was a square involved in all the squares were involved in all the transits except for 1929. There were some oppositions, not in all of the crashes. There was no oppositions in 1896 or in 2008 or 2025 and 2020. There was some conjunctions. There was trines involved in all of these crashes, which surprised me because I thought that it would be challenging transits to trigger a crash, but I was incorrect on that. Sextiles were involved in some of them, and parallels and contraparallels were involved in all of them, meaning a planet was at the same degree latitude or the same degree on the opposite latitude. The trines really surprised me because some of these charts were dominated by all positive transits. So then I broke it down even further, and I took a look at what transits were within 1 degree of each other, 1 degree or less. I wanted to hone in on what was possibly the main causing factor. In 1857, Uranus was in a sextile to the North Node. Before I go any further, I also took into account if planets were at 0 degrees or 29 degrees, 18 or 22 degrees. 18 and 22 degrees are critical degrees. They do represent endings, misfortune, depression. Whether they were involved in the exact transit or not, some of them were, some of them were not, but I just took that into account just to see if that was any type of factor. So in 1857, Uranus was in a sextile to the North Node. They were at 29 degree Taurus, and the North Node was at 28 degrees Pisces. Taurus is another sign that a lot of planets were in. Aries as well was another dominant sign that planets were in with these crashes. Venus was at 18 degrees of Cancer. In 1873, Saturn was at 26 degrees Capricorn, was in a square to Neptune at 27 degrees of Aries. And Jupiter was also conjunct Lilith in Virgo at 15 degrees. 1873, there were not any planets that were 18 or 22 degrees. 1893, Neptune was in a conjunction to Pluto. They were both in Gemini. Neptune was at 10 degrees Gemini. Pluto was at 9 degrees Gemini. And again, there were no planets at 18 or 22 degrees. In 1896, Jupiter was at 19 degrees Scorpio, conjunct Uranus at 24 degrees of Scorpio. Oh, those were not conjunct, but I put this in there because I also was looking to see if Saturn-Uranus transits were dominant, and if they were, if that was an influence. I have found that they were not an aspect to each other a majority of the time. Jupiter was at 0 degrees of Leo, trine, and it was trine to Uranus at 24. They were not within the 1 degree, but because Jupiter was at 0 degrees, I added this in there. And Jupiter was also in a trine to Lilith. In 1907, there were no transits that were within 1 degree of each other. There were transits occurring, but none at 1 degree, within 1 degree of each other. The North Node, though, was at 18 degrees of Cancer. In 1929, Mars was in Scorpio at 12 degrees opposite the North Node and Chiron at 12 degrees of Taurus. In 1937, Jupiter was in Capricorn at 18 degrees, trine to Neptune in Virgo at 17, and Saturn was in Aries at 4 degrees trine to Lilith in Sagittarius. In 1973, Mars was in Taurus at 4 degrees, sextile to Saturn in Cancer at 4 degrees, and Pluto was in a square to Saturn in Cancer, and Chiron was at 18 degrees. In 1987, Jupiter was in Aries at 24 degrees, trine to Uranus at 23. Mars was in a sextile to Lilith, and the North Node was at 1 degrees, and Uranus was at 22 degrees Libra, and Chiron was at 18 degrees of Aries. In 2000, the North Node was at 1 degree of Leo, and this was contraparallel to Lilith in Capricorn at 1 degree, and Saturn and Uranus were in a square that year. Uranus was at 18 degrees of Taurus, while Saturn was at 13 degrees of Taurus. 2008, the North Node was conjunct Chiron in Aquarius at 16, and the North Node and Chiron also sextile to Lilith, and Neptune was at 22 degrees. 2015, Jupiter was in Leo at 18 degrees, trining to Uranus in Aries at 19. Lilith was at 22 degrees Virgo, opposite to Chiron in Pisces at 21 degrees, and Saturn was at 29 degrees of Scorpio. In 2020, Jupiter was at 18 degrees Capricorn, sextiling to Neptune in Pisces, and Lilith was conjunct Chiron in Aries at 3 degrees. 2025, our current year that we're in, Saturn was in Pisces at 24, sextile to Uranus in Taurus at 24 degrees. Mars was in Cancer, trine to Saturn, sextile to Lilith at 24 degrees. Neptune was at 0 Aries, Lilith was at 0 Capricorn, and Chiron was at 22 degrees of Aries. With all the information that I have compiled together, because it was a lot of information, is that Saturn and Uranus, while they are major movers of the market, were not the dominant transits. They were not involved in every single or occurring within every single crash. Trines and sextiles, positive transits, or transits that we consider to be giving a positive influence, was a strong factor in a lot of these crashes. They were the transits that were the closest within 1 degree or less. So we can say that a square, an opposition, or even a conjunction between two malefic planets like Saturn and Pluto is not always the cause of a crash. It's when there are all these positive transits occurring, and there's some challenging transits occurring, but it could be that over optimism, that over speculation in the market, and then a bubble bursting, and fear just is suddenly injected into the market, causing the crash. It's this over optimism leading to a crash, could be. The 18 and 22 degrees, while they were present in quite a few of the transits of the crashes, we could say that this could be also a trigger of possible crashes. Not every time, because not every time a planet crosses the 18 or 22 degrees means that there's going to be a crash occurring. No, that's not the case. But because we have planets that were in a transit at 18 or 22 degrees, we can also say that this is a period to watch the outer planets, Chiron, as well as Lilith and the North Node. Mars, if it's involved in a transit and it's at 18 degrees to an outer planet, could be something to also watch and look at. Now, with all of this information that I have, there's not a definite signature. There's not one transit that occurs that signals a crash coming in. I thought that would be the case, but it's not. It's not the case at all. So what is the formula for a crash from what I have observed? When Neptune and Pluto are in a transit to each other, whether it's a sextile, a conjunction, a trine, a square, an opposition, and they're within 1 degree or less of being in an exact transit, this is a signal of a crash. If they are not within a transit, within 1 degrees of each other, then Neptune or Pluto, or both, will be in a transit to another outer planet, and this includes North Node, Chiron, and Lilith, occurring at the same time while Neptune and or Pluto are within a transit with an outer planet. There will be 2 or more outer planets within a 1 degree of being exact to each other. Now, this can include Pluto or Neptune within this exact transit of 1 degree or less. The North Node, if that is in a transit to a planet, whether it's opposition, conjunction, square, especially with Chiron and Lilith, that is also a signature that it combined with all the other ones I just listed to take note of. Some secondary factors to also take note of would be if planets are at 0 or 29 degrees, especially if they're involved in some of these transits that are almost exact. And also planets at 18 and 22 degrees. Again, whether they're involved in the transit, especially if they're involved in the transit, but if they're not, and they're involved in another outer transit, that is also something to take note of. This is a chart of 1987, just to have a chart up in here. Saturn and Uranus were conjunct to each other, and Jupiter was trining to Uranus. Saturn, Uranus, that is challenging, but Jupiter and Uranus, you could look at it and say, well, this would expand the prices, cause the market to move up. And yes, that would be the case with Jupiter and Uranus. With Saturn and Uranus next to each other, And then Neptune's involvement here, squaring the North Node, Pluto squaring to Lilith. It's this overhype of the market met with the bubble to be burst, people's confidence to become crashing down with each other. This is 1938. Jupiter was trying to Uranus, trying to Neptune, and Saturn was trying to Pluto. Right off the bat, and Mars was trying to Saturn. Right off the bat, just looking at these transits, we could say, wow, this is going to be a really positive time for the market. Even Pluto was in a trine to Lilith. Great time for the market, ramping up, people over-speculating, taking more of a risk within the markets. We also have Neptune that's a square to the North Node, causing fear, causing the direction of the market to possibly take a sudden unexpected turn. And then Lilith conjunct the North Node. In 1929, we'll take a look at this one as well. Saturn was in a trine to Neptune. Very positive, great moves up. Again, that over-speculation, over-hype of the market, that fantasy that the market will never come crashing down. North Node was in a trine to Lilith. That's also would be positive, but we have Pluto here that's opposite to Lilith. Again, bursting that bubble, bursting people's overhyping of the market. And while each chart does look different, because every time there was a crash, it was not a definite Saturn was squaring to Neptune or Neptune was in a square to the North Node. That was not the case. But there's so many factors that are involved within a crash. Looking at the surrounding world events that are occurring will also be an indicator of a crash as well. It's the outer planets that are dictating the direction of the market, and the overhyping, overinflation of the market is also, I believe, an indicator that we should keep in mind. Let me know what you think. If you're seeing anything that I may have missed, because there's a lot of information. I will be making a part 2 to this. I'm not sure what angle I'm going to be taking. I'll probably be looking at all-time highs, because I have found that all-time highs are in direct correlation with the crashes as well. And a lot of times, all-time highs have happened right before a crash has occurred. Hope you guys enjoyed. I am a crypto consultant, and I do crypto astrology. If you would like a personal reading for yourself to understand when is maybe the best time for yourself to trade, link is in the description below for a free 15-minute consultation, or you can come and join my Patreon, where I write up a monthly report for the transits and to understand the direction of the market for the crypto market. Links in the description below. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and share.